Usher's secret weapon revealed. What Diddy did to him at 14. Left the courtroom in shock. The room was silent. Not courtroom silent. Colder. A silence that clung to the walls. Soaked into the carpet. Made the gallery lean forward and hold its breath. Then came the sound of shoes measured. Steady echoing through the chamber. Heads turned. Eyes widened. It was Usher Raymond. Not the polished showman. Not the smooth voice from the radio. This was a man walking into battle with ghosts at his back. No one expected him to testify. And yet, as the judge motioned for the next witness, the singer stepped forward, not with a performance, but with a reckoning. He didn't look at Diddy. Not at first. He looked at the jury. I was 14 when I met him, he said, voice controlled, low. I thought I was going to learn how to be a star. I didn't know I was walking into a kingdom of silence. That first sentence changed everything. The courtroom's temperature dropped. Journalists fumbled for their pens. And Diddy. He leaned back, smirk gone, jaw locked. It began in New York. Usher, fresh off his debut, had been sent to live with Sean Combs, then the undisputed kingmaker of hip-hop. The arrangement on paper was a dream mentorship, exposure, career fast-tracked to the stratosphere. L.A. Reed had brokered it himself, but what Usher encountered in that Manhattan penthouse was no mentorship. I thought Flavor Camp was branding, he recalled, but it was indulgence, disguised, codified, champagne at breakfast, strangers on couches, masks at midnight, one night. 3 a.m., he woke to music drifting down the hallway. Candles flickered. He followed the sound. What he found wasn't a party. It was a ritual. There were lists, cameras. No one flinched. I remember thinking, am I in a movie? Is this real? He wasn't meant to see it, but he did. And he remembered Diddy, seated across the room, shifted in his chair. For the first time in days, his legal team looked nervous. This wasn't just testimony. This was a strategy. Usher had waited decades not out of fear, but calculation. And now, with the court's attention, he was pulling back the curtain piece by piece. He detailed the early warnings. He never got how even his mother signed the NDA thinking it was standard. They called it a non-disclosure. It was a muzzle. By the time he was 16, he was under contract to never speak of what he saw. But silence isn't the same as healing, he said, and his voice cracked for the first time. And what you bury, it doesn't stay buried. One juror gasped when he recounted the Caribbean trip at 15. No press, no cameras, just Diddy, a few associates, and a teenager alone. I wasn't given a choice, he admitted, and it took years to realize I'd been groomed. That word, groomed, it hit like a gavel. Usher wasn't just painting himself as a victim. He was threading a needle through every silent nod, every veiled threat, every missed opportunity that followed. The parties grew darker, the mentorship turned into control, and whenever he questioned it, he was reminded who made his career. You don't bite the hand that feeds you, Diddy once told him. Remember who gave you this life. Usher didn't respond then, but today, in court, he did. You didn't give me this life, he said, eyes locked across the aisle. You gave me nightmares. The turning point came with the NDA. Usher presented the document the signed underage, co-signed by his mother, drafted by bad boys' lawyers. In the light of today's allegations, phrases like audio-visual discretion took on darker meaning. Years later, when he tried to break the silence for a magazine interview, he got a call. They said, "We hope you're not trying to jeopardize your reputation." He paused. It wasn't a reminder. It was a warning. But it was more than lawyers now. It was watchers, shadows, calls from unknown numbers. "You think you're out," he said, "but the orbit keeps pulling." And then came the first real bombshell, the Atlanta party. Usher was 17. The mansion was filled with celebrities, models, unfamiliar men. But what haunted him was the secret room. Diddy whispered to a guard. The door creaked open. "You're not ready for that yet?" Diddy had said. Usher peeked. There were masks. That's all I'll say. He trailed off. Silence. Again. A kind of silence that doesn't come from nerves, but from knowing your words might reshape the world. The judge nodded, allowing Usher to submit a photocopied journal, entries from 1999-2000. Handwritten? Specific. Naming no names, but filled with dread. Loyalty keeps you on tour. One entry quoted Diddy, "Honesty puts you back home." By now, even Diddy's allies looked rattled. But Usher wasn't done. The moment he said it, dreams were sold. But your soul was the price. You could feel it in the room. This wasn't just testimony anymore. It was transformation. The boy they thought had been broken was standing upright, eyes locked, and fully in control of the narrative. And that's what Diddy had never counted on. Usher didn't run from the shadows. He had been studying them. The journal he brought out was no prop. It was a time capsule. 20 years' worth of coded memories, hidden anguish, and slow burn understanding. Each entry was a breadcrumb, each word a quiet resistance. The court, initially skeptical, now leaned in, transfixed. March 1999. Usher read again. They kept talking about loyalty. Said, "Loyalty keeps you on tour. Honesty puts you back home." And Diddy laughed. He looked at the jury. Back then, I thought it was a joke. Now, I know it was policy. That sentence lingered. In a world obsessed with image, loyalty wasn't a virtue. It was currency, and honesty punishable. But that night in the New York hotel in 2001, that was the fracture. The smell of a familiar candle, the hallway that mirrored one from his teen years. It triggered something deep, buried. I dropped to the floor, couldn't breathe, couldn't think. It wasn't anxiety, it was memory, clawing its way back. He was taken to a clinic in Northern California, under a pseudonym. Only his manager knew. He stayed 5 days, no phones, no press. They said it was exhaustion. He told the court, but it was PTSD. That's what the psychiatrist called it. I had to relearn what safety meant, and it was in that clinic. Alone, anonymous, that Usher made a decision. Not to run, but to record every fragmented memory, every whispered warning, every door that closed too quickly or phone call that ended too suddenly. I started to map it. Not just what happened to me, but how the whole machine worked. He began reaching out quietly to others. Not directly, but through patterns, through questions, through shared silences that said everything words couldn't. And that's when the scale of it all became clear. This wasn't just about Diddy. It was about the system he built. The one that had turned talent into collateral, mentorship into leverage, contracts into chains. Usher revealed that by 2004, he had quietly hired an independent accountant separate from his label, separate from his team. What the accountant found stunned even him. Over $4.3 million in unpaid royalties. The rights to his masters gone until he turned 35. Every time I got close to asking about it publicly, Usher explained there was a distraction, a leak, a scandal, a call from legal reminding me about my NDA. The pattern was too precise to be coincidence. It was orchestration. He wasn't the only one. Usher named names not in open court, but on sealed documents submitted to the judge Carl Thomas. Total. Black Rob. Craig Mack. Different artists. Same arc. They'd be brought in, promised everything, and, once they asked questions, ghosted, silenced. One, he claimed, tried to go public in 2011. He called me, Usher recalled, said he was scared, said he had proof. Then the meeting never happened, and neither did he. Gone. Vanished. Usher said, nobody's seen him since. Not on socials. Not at events. Not anywhere. The courtroom was frozen again. Not in shock this time. In recognition. They understood now. The whispers. The disappearances. The uncanny silences that trailed too many names in the industry. This wasn't paranoia. It was pattern. And Usher was showing his receipts. He returned to a specific night in 1997. Miami. The Satai Hotel. He was told it was a business dinner. A chance to meet a global investor. Diddy hyped it up. Dress sharp. Be polite. This could change your life. What waited for him? 3 men in robes. Champagne. Girls seated silently in the background. One of them asked, do you want to be remembered forever? He wasn't talking about music, Usher said. He left that night. The next week, he was removed from a tour. A producer backed out. No one said why, but he knew. That was the price for saying no. And then came the most haunting detail of all. Weeks later, Diddy showed him a video. It wasn't staged. It wasn't consensual. It was another young artist doing something he would never agree to unless someone made him. Usher looked straight ahead as he told the story. Diddy laughed. Rewound it. Watch my face? The prosecutor asked. Did he threaten you? Usher shook his head. He didn't have to. The people around him did. They didn't use words. They used silence and exile. The court didn't breathe. The empire, once untouchable, was now transparent. And Usher. He wasn't just surviving it, he was dismantling it one truth at a time. And now came the most potent weapon in his arsenal. Paper. Ink. The seemingly innocuous fine print that built empires and broke spirits. Usher reached into a manila folder. He pulled out a series of documents, copies of contracts, annotated emails, royalty statements riddled with discrepancies. Not speculation, not memory, proof. This is how the power worked, he said, eyes sweeping across the courtroom. Not with threats, not even with silence, but with documents that stole your voice and sold your future. The gallery was stunned. This wasn't showmanship. It was strategy. Usher had gone from storytelling to a forensic audit, and every line he read peeled another layer from the illusion Diddy had spent decades perfecting. The first contract was a development deal from 1994. Usher was 14. The language was dense, full of legalese, clauses hidden within clauses. One section granted Bad Boy Records the right to distribute, edit, and even withhold release of any recorded material indefinitely. Another detail, Usher's masters were signed over entirely until he reached 35 years of age. I thought I was getting a record deal, he explained. What I signed was ownership over my voice, my story, and my image. And he wasn't alone. He laid out similar deals from other artists, some famous, some forgotten. Each followed the same blueprint promised the world, then locked the artist into a maze of dependency. Usher turned the page, a string of emails between Bad Boy Records executives. One stood out, make sure the parents are in the room. The younger the artist, the easier to frame it as standard industry procedure. Don't give them time to consult outside counsel. The jury exchanged glances. This wasn't carelessness. This was premeditation. Usher continued, calmly. This wasn't just about control over music. It was control over narrative, over memory, over what we could or couldn't say about the world we lived in. That's when he introduced the term strategic silence. a tactic deployed across the industry where silence wasn't just expected, it was incentivized. Artists who complied received tour opportunities, sponsorships, award show slots. Those who didn't, ghosted, blacklisted. One artist whose name Usher withheld had confronted Diddy about royalties in 2006. The following week, his album was shelved. A year later, he was no longer signed. He disappeared. Usher said, not literally, but from airplay, bookings, relevance. It's like he'd never existed. He paused. Let the moment settle. That's what the machine could do. Erase you. Not with violence, but with absence. And then came the masterstroke. Usher submitted an audio recording. It was a private conversation between him and a former bad boy accountant. The voice shaky, paranoid, outlined a hidden ledger. $4.3 million in missing royalties, unpaid bonuses, unauthorized deductions for branding fees. At one point, the voice said, if you knew what they really owe you, you wouldn't sleep at night. The courtroom froze. Usher looked directly at the defense. Now I do, he said, and I haven't slept since. The defense team scrambled. Objections flew, but the judge allowed it. And that's when Usher pivoted again from evidence to intent. He explained how Diddy's contracts weren't just about money. They were maps, designed to corner young talent, box them into loyalty, and, ultimately, strip them of independence. If you broke the rules, he said, you didn't just lose a deal. You lost access, airplay, publicity, your story. One particularly jarring moment came when he recounted a meeting with Diddy in 2010. Usher had asked about revisiting his masters. Diddy leaned back, smiled, and said, if I gave back what I took, I'd have nothing left. This empire wasn't built on hits. It was built on silence. Usher paused. That's when I realized silence was his business model. The courtroom murmured. Several jurors shook their heads in disbelief. Usher wasn't finished. He revealed that in 2011 he had quietly tried to negotiate a collective renegotiation effort, a secret meeting with other artists to confront Bad Boy's business practices. But the meeting never happened. A week before the planned date, someone leaked the details. Usher received a text from an unlisted number. Not everything needs to be healed in public. Let it go. The message was followed by a video link. He didn't open it. He knew what it was. I deleted it, he said. But not because I was scared, because I realized the rules of this game hadn't changed. At that point, the judge ordered a recess, but no one left the room. Even during the break, the energy in the air was electric, like something had torn loose, and no one could unsee it. The image of Diddy, once the untouchable titan, was fraying. The courtroom no longer saw a mogul defending his name. They saw an empire, one of contracts, image control, and psychological warfare collapsing under the weight of its own secrets. And Usher. He wasn't just the witness anymore. He was the blueprint for resistance. And like any blueprint, he didn't just show the structure, he showed how to dismantle it, brick by brick. When court resumed, the room hadn't recovered. Whispers echoed like ghosts. Reporters hunched over their devices. Defense lawyers shuffled, eyes darting. Diddy's face, once an icon of impassive control, now flickered between annoyance and fear. But Usher, still calm, still calculating. And now, he was about to shine a light on what the industry had learned to keep in the shadows the people who vanished. This isn't just about me, Usher began, gently placing the next piece of evidence on the table. A photograph, low resolution, time-stamped, blurred but clear enough to identify 3 people. 2 of them were industry veterans. The third was a young artist whose career had flickered and died without explanation. You may not remember his name, Usher told the jury, but you remember his voice. He played a short clip, a chorus, haunting, beautiful. Then silence. He turned the volume down. He tried to leave the system. He told me he had receipts, emails, videos. Then, nothing. Disappeared. Social media wiped. Footage gone. Even his songs were pulled from streaming. The jury leaned in. I reached out for years. Nothing. Last I heard, someone said he moved overseas. No confirmation. No forwarding contact. Just gone. This wasn't conspiracy. It was choreography. Erasure as policy. Usher continued, laying out a map literally, a series of dots across the U.S. and Caribbean private estates, rented venues, unregistered retreats, places he had been taken, places other artists had whispered about in passing. One address in particular made the courtroom still, an estate in Atlanta. That's where the mask came in, he said. Usher took a breath. This part isn't easy. He described the night 1996. Diddy invited him to an exclusive party, lavish, high security, invite only. Everything glittered. Chandeliers. Champagne pyramids. Celebrities everywhere. But none of that stuck with him. What did the locked door, the whisper? You're not ready for that yet. He peeked anyway. What he saw was hard to explain. People in masks. Music that didn't match the mood. A hush, not of celebration, but of ritual. It wasn't what they were doing, Usher said quietly. It was how normal it felt. No shock, no shame, just orchestration. He paused. That's when I knew I wasn't in the music business. I was in something else. The prosecutor asked, "Did you ever speak to anyone else who saw it?" Usher nodded. "One of Diddy's drivers told me. We all see. We just don't speak." Another artist said, "That room's been there since the 90s. I didn't need confirmation. Their eyes gave it away. It wasn't just an open secret. It was institutional memory. Passed down. Protected. Enforced." Then came the moment that broke the court's emotional barrier. Usher shared a transcript from a 2011 call with Justin Bieber, one that had never been made public. His voice was shaking when he read it. "I want to come home," Justin said. Usher looked away, then back. He didn't say from where. He didn't need to. I knew. The courtroom gasped. From there, Usher moved to the core of Diddy's manipulation identity theft, not of names, but of narratives. He read aloud a clause from another NDA he had signed at 16. Any personal experiences, impressions, or incidents witnessed during association with Bad Boy Records are considered proprietary and confidential, and not to be shared under any media format, even post-termination. Let that sink in. Not footage, not intellectual property, personal experience. That contract didn't just want my songs, Usher said. It wanted my story. And that was Diddy's genius. His weapon. He didn't just trap you in ink. He stole your ability to remember out loud. The climax of Part 4 came not from a document or a quote, but from a name that Usher almost didn't say. A name that wasn't allowed in headlines. A young female artist from the early 2000s. He didn't reveal it directly, but he showed a blurry screen grab from a now-deleted live video. She was crying, slurring, mumbling something about contracts and cameras. That was her last public appearance, Usher said. I reached out. Her label said she was taking time off. That was 10 years ago. No one had heard from her since. Usher turned to the gallery. There are more of them, he said. I know it. They're watching this, wondering if it's safe to speak. Some of them are scared. Some are ashamed. Some are just tired. He held up his journal again. That's why I kept writing. Even when I wasn't ready to speak. I needed to remember. And now, remembering wasn't enough. Now was the time to expose, to confront, to make sure the echoes of the past didn't become the silence of the future. When court resumed, the atmosphere had shifted. This wasn't just a trial anymore. It felt like a reckoning, not just for Diddy, but for an industry that had built its legacy on what no one dared say out loud. Usher was ready to cross the red line and take everyone watching with him. He began with a final entry, dated July 2002, written in sharp pen strokes, slightly smudged as if pressed too hard against the page. Tonight broke me. I saw a side of him that made me wonder if anything before this had ever been real. I need out. I just don't know if I'll survive the exit. Usher looked up, eyes glassy. That was the night in the Hollywood Hills. You could feel the courtroom hold its breath. He began to recount it, slowly. The location, a gated estate hidden in the canyon. No GPS tag, no social media posts, just an address passed through whispers. He was told it was a private introduction to a European producer who could fund his next tour. He arrived. There was no producer, just velvet curtains, ambient music, and a table stacked with NDAs. Phones were taken at the door, Usher said. We weren't told why, but we knew. The crowd was A-list, models, young artists, a few executives, some recognizable, some who didn't belong to the music world at all. But it wasn't a party. It was initiation. He described the vibe, artificial joy laced with something darker. Doors guarded by security, rooms within rooms. Lights dimmed just enough to blur details. Then came the side room, a hallway, a whisper, a hand on his shoulder. You're not ready yet? Diddy's voice. I still thought he meant music, Usher said. I didn't understand. He paused. Until I saw the contracts. These weren't the typical NDAs. They had unusual clauses, ones Usher had never seen, even in his years in the business. Language about performance discretion, external optics, visual reproduction rights, and compliance for brand security. The phrasing wasn't legal protection, he explained. It was psychological control. Everyone there had to sign. Some didn't even read. Some signed out of fear. Others ambition. He refused. That's when he saw Diddy again sitting in a back room, surrounded by people who weren't music executives, whispering to a man in a silk robe. He looked at me, didn't smile, just said, "You still think this is about music?" Usher left that night, and he never returned. The prosecutor asked what changed after that night. Usher didn't hesitate. Everything. Suddenly, tour plans were shelved. Collaborations evaporated. Producers he had worked with for years ghosted him. I wasn't blacklisted, he said. I was shadowed, quietly edged out. The industry didn't punish him loudly. It erased him softly. But that's not where this part ends. Because Usher didn't stay erased. He came back. He rebuilt. And most importantly, he watched. From a distance. But never disconnected. He began tracking patterns. Disappearances. Suspicious drops in visibility. Young artists who rose fast and fell faster. And then came the tipping point. The infamous Drink Champs clip. Diddy slurring, laughing, referencing past parties. It went viral. And it triggered something, not just in the public, in Usher. I saw comments, people connecting dots, survivors whispering to each other online. It was like the internet cracked the seal. He reached out to legal teams, spoke to advocacy groups, consulted trauma therapists, quietly, deliberately. And then he made a decision. If I didn't speak now, I never would. But before the courtroom could fully digest this, Usher pulled out the final page of his journal. Unpublished. Never shown to anyone before. It was dated the night he severed ties with Diddy for good. I survived, Puffy. But did the kid in me survive? I still don't know. The room went dead still. Even the judge's expression softened. That sentence, Usher said, is why I'm here. Because I didn't just lose money or opportunities. I lost time. I lost safety. I lost pieces of myself. I'm still trying to put back together. Then he turned to the camera, to the live stream. He spoke directly to the unseen audience. This isn't just about one man. It's about a culture. A system that told kids like me to be quiet, to be grateful, to never question the hand that fed us. He paused, but I am questioning it. And I'm not afraid anymore. He looked to the jury. Not for me. I've lived through it. I'm doing this for the ones who didn't. The gavel didn't strike. The judge didn't speak. No one moved. Because in that moment, something irreversible had happened. Usher had crossed the red line, and he'd taken the entire court, the music industry, and a generation of silenced voices with him. This wasn't a testimony. It was a declaration. The reckoning was no longer coming. It had arrived. But the reckoning, as Usher knew too well, wasn't a moment. It was a movement. And this was just the beginning. As he stepped down from the witness stand, no applause followed, no music swelled, no dramatic exit, just stillness, the kind of stillness that comes after a storm, when the truth hangs too heavy in the air to be processed all at once. But in that stillness, something had shifted. Diddy didn't rise. He didn't meet Usher's gaze, because whatever verdict the jury might one day deliver, one judgment had already been rendered by public memory, by survivor solidarity, by the very system that once empowered Diddy and now stood exposed beneath the weight of every page, every quote, every name Usher hadn't even needed to say out loud. The defense scrambled in the following days. They filed objections, motioned to strike sections of Usher's journal, argued that emotional testimony was theatrical, irrelevant, and prejudicial. But it didn't matter, because outside the courtroom, the floodgates had opened. Old interviews resurfaced. Former assistants began leaking documents. Other artists, once too scared to speak, started posting vague tweets. Some offered emojis, others just one word, listening. And then the real moment hit. A voicemail leaked, dated 2005, allegedly of Diddy screaming at an unnamed artist about loyalty, about not forgetting who owns your voice. The voice on the other end. Silent. Terrified. By the end of the week, a pattern had emerged, not in the testimony, in the aftermath. A TikTok from a former boy band member. A podcast with a background vocalist from the 2000s. A grainy clip from a BET afterparty. Whispers becoming shouts. Memories becoming evidence. And through it all, Usher remained quiet. Not absent, just steady. He wasn't online. He didn't chase headlines. He didn't drop a surprise single or launch a documentary. Because his victory wasn't about vindication. It was about validation for the voiceless, the discarded, the silenced. In a private interview granted only after his testimony concluded, Usher was asked what justice looked like. His answer was almost too soft to hear. Justice is knowing that the truth outlived the lie. He was then asked if he feared retaliation. He smiled. Not bitter. Just tired. I already survived the worst part. Speaking out was the easy part. As the trial neared its end, the prosecution introduced corroborative witnesses. One by one, they told stories that mirrored Usher's a 16-year-old background. Singer promised a solo deal, who signed an NDA after one weekend at Diddy's estate. A stylist who noticed bruises on young talent but was told we don't ask. A DJ who quit after being asked to destroy footage in a locked briefcase. Each story was a thread, each thread part of a much darker tapestry. The defense, outmaneuvered, leaned into its last remaining tactic: discredit the messenger. They pulled out old interviews where Usher praised Diddy, clips of them laughing together. They even implied that Usher's silence for 2 decades undermined his credibility. But that was the trap. Usher had anticipated it. And so, during rebuttal, the prosecution read aloud a page from his unpublished journal dated 2001. They'll say I smiled. They'll say I said nothing. But silence isn't consent. And performance isn't peace. That line broke the room. Even the court clerk wiped a tear. Outside the courthouse, the energy was electric. A mural appeared overnight. Usher, pen in hand. The phrase "memory is power" painted above him. Hashtags trended globally. Artists who had once denied involvement now issued vague apologies, claiming complicity by inaction. It wasn't enough, but it was a start. In the final moments of the trial, the judge allowed Usher to deliver a closing reflection, not a legal statement, but a personal one. He stood once more. No notes, no documents, just his voice. Before the music, before the lights. I was a kid with a dream, and that dream was used against me. He looked directly at Diddy. You built an empire on fear. I'm here to dismantle it with truth. Then he turned to the jury. But this isn't just about him. This is about every system that thrives when we stay quiet. Every silence that protects a paycheck. Every NDA that buries a scream. He took a breath. I broke my silence. Now the rest is up to you. And that was it. No theatrics, no viral clip, just finality. The kind that echoes long after the gavel falls. In the weeks that followed, Usher quietly funded a foundation, the Witness Table, to support artists with legal aid, mental health counseling, and protection when speaking out against abuse in the industry. He didn't announce it. Someone leaked it. And Usher confirmed it with a single tweet. Let no story die in the dark. The verdict's still pending, but Usher had already won, because in a world built on silence, the loudest sound is truth. And this time, it didn't come from a hit single. It came from the survivor who refused to stay quiet.